Uh-huh.
In case somebody is joining us, this is Katie Stroud, and she's an instructional designer and e-learning consultant based out of Seattle. I met Katie at a conference, Northwest e-learning. They have some kind of weird NW We Learn and We Learn conference up in Portland, and we got to talking because of technical communication, tech writing, but instructional design. And after we had chatted a bit, I asked if she'd be willing to interview at some point for one of the classes, and she kindly had agreed. And so we are here now. Hopefully, if you're not watching this live, then you're watching this recorded in one of our classes, or you might even be somebody else. Just so that we can contextualize a little bit. So most of the students in this class, it's instructional design, and 70 to 80% of the people in the program, in our master's program, Education Information Technology, are K through 12 teachers. But we have a growing segment of individuals who work in industry, consulting, government, and actually instructional design. OSU has recently hired, I think, at least 2 to 3 of our graduates, and they keep on having job openings, and our people keep on going there. And we're in the process of developing an instructional design certificate. And part of the instructional design, why I'm interviewing you and why I really want to interview other instructional designers, is that I'm an academic mostly. I have like 1 client, 2 client experience in terms of working with instructional design. While designing in a higher education environment or for classrooms is useful, I think our students would be better prepared if they knew what it was like also in an industry, so that if they have different goals that emerge, if they need to earn extra money or they want to earn extra money, or if they want to shift careers, then they can move, and so they have a better application in a variety of places they can apply their skills. So I prefer to turn to people who know more about their job than I do, which, is in most cases. You have the subject matter experts talk about their own field. So that's why this long-winded introduction, that's why hopefully, we will generate some great value for our students. And many of them are in their mid to late 20s, but we have a pretty mixed gender and working background, and up through I think the 50s, and maybe even a couple people in their 60s. So, but everybody is interested in education and teaching and learning. So, did you want to introduce yourself briefly and provide a little bit of, how would you describe yourself to somebody that doesn't know your work or your field professionally?
Well, thank you, Gregory. I'm Katie Stroud. I just incorporated myself earlier this year as Incremental Success. I don't have my webpage up there yet, but if you go to my website, you'll see a placeholder. I tell people that I do training development, and usually people in the corporate world seem to know what that means, because the corporate world needs training of all kinds. They need training to know how to answer the phones in a service industry, or the health industry it needs all kinds of training on how to wash their hands properly and how to give people their meds. And one of the industries that I work in quite a bit is technology, specifically in online advertising. And while that sounds exciting and stuff, usually what the content that I deal with is the intricate technical details of how an ad gets from a server onto your browser whenever you go to a place and see an ad there. And there's a lot of people and businesses that work between here and there that need to understand the technology and how to make it work. So that's so I usually say I'm in training development. If you use a word like instructional design, people give you that deer in the headlights kind of look, like, oh, what is that? So in the corporate world, it's training development. People get it. Instructional design, not so much.
So how would you, in terms of instructional design, if someone was wanting to start, for example, they have one or two classes in basic instructional design that they've taken, or they have an interest and they've done a lot of reading, but they're keeping their full-time job because they're smart as they try to branch out and develop the background or the additional work. How does one get their foot in? How do you get your foot in a instructional design job with industry or working with corporations?
I read a list of the top 13 things of successful people, and number 2 on that list, well, the guy that invented this said that he had put this thing way at the bottom, and then, long story short, one of the most important things for doing what you love to do and getting your foot in the door and all of that is rub elbows with the greats. So you need to network, you need to know people, you need to make friends just for the sake of making friends. You don't want to go and talk to people and say, hey, can we connect for business purposes? You really need to take a genuine interest in the people that you meet and find out things about them that can help you, and find out things that they need in which you can offer some kind of help to them. And building a meaningful network like that is absolutely vital in getting where you want in life.
So essentially, not just going out and seeking specific client, like I must develop client list, instead working on networking and then allowing those relationships to develop, and then clients potentially emerging from those different relationships. Would you say that's is that an accurate?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, there's another phone ringing in my house somewhere.
Not a
uh,
problem.
so yes, engaging with people, getting to know them, and not necessarily in your own field. And to come back with your question there, in my line of work, I have actually not had to go and sell my services. I've not had to go out and look for work. Because of the people I know, the work that I'm doing is all from people who have come to me and called me and said, hey, Katie, I remember you used to do this kind of thing, or can you help me out with this? And
So you have
that's how I
you
do.
have customers coming, you have paying customers coming to you.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
that's always that is a lovely position to be in. That is a
Yes,
lovely.
and that all comes from making friends. I'm generally offering something that a friend needs, and they generally have budget that keeps me employed.
Would you be willing to describe a little bit in terms of the range of the clients that you've worked with, just so we get a sense of the spectrum or the different kinds of clients that are out there that use or need training and development, or instructional design, as we like to call it?
That's right. There's a just about every industry out there needs training and development. I don't think I've come across any industry that hasn't. Now, me personally, I mentioned that I work a lot in the digital online advertising world on the technical side of things. I've also worked with in the world of program management. There's this complex program management methodology called earned value management, and it's something that the government requires of any company that contracts with the government on really big projects, like $1 million projects and stuff. And in order for those companies to win that work, they have to use this methodology because it creates transparency and you can see your performance and measure it. And they can see very early on in the project whether or not the deadlines are going to be made. So it's incredibly complex, and it involves more than just explaining what this methodology is. It actually involves working with clients to change their behaviors across the board and get everybody into this rhythm of keeping track of what it is they're doing. And so that's an industry that I have worked in on and off. I recently worked for a consultant agency that in their HR department. So they hire consultants to work with companies like Microsoft or, whoever needs help doing any number of things from, writing code to developing training. But I came to that company. They didn't ask me to come and consult for them with other companies. They wanted me to help them deliver training for their consultants, or not deliver, but develop. And the interesting thing about that audience was that consultants are very busy, and if they're not working, the consultant agency is not making money. So they have to be doing their hourly thing. So we resorted very much to short, hour-long web-delivered things because they were also dispersed all across the United States. And so that was very interesting because delivering a web presentation, designing training for delivery in a web environment is a lot different than designing something that's going to be delivered in class, because people are looking at a screen. You need to be engaging them visually just as much as auditorily. So, HR departments, complicated program management, and digital advertising. I worked with a couple of presentation companies that their specialty was in developing that web presentation delivery, which they're very good at, but sometimes they needed to teach something. They needed somebody to develop something a little more formal in terms of instructional, as opposed to just delivering a presentation. And so I've been in that industry as well.
Great. So I have a scripted question because I want to make sure that I read it properly here. As a solutions provider, problem solver, as it were, what is the most common problem you see when you help out individual clients and corporate clients when you're developing training or learning solutions? What's the thing that crops up repeatedly?
There are actually 3 things, but the number one thing is that people forget that you're not just developing some kind of training. You're trying to solve a business problem. And if you forget that, you can develop the best training in the world. If it doesn't affect the business some way, that it doesn't achieve some kind of business goal, then that training, that instructional design, all that work is nothing more than a cost to the business, a cost that didn't really do anything but except maybe make some of their people a little bit smarter. So the number one thing is, what are the business goals for this training? The number 2 thing is that everybody wants to put too much information into that. And looking back at the number 1 problem, if you're looking at the business goal, then you can cut out all the unnecessary stuff. If you really, really need it, you can put it in some kind of reference that maybe 1% of the people will actually go and read someday. And of course, you'll have to go and update it when it's out of date, because things get outdated very quickly sometimes. Um, so yeah, focus on the business goal. Number two, only put in there what you need in there. Don't put the whole encyclopedia in it. The number three thing is that people have a hard time telling a good story. People learn with stories, and you need to build that up for them. They're much more engaged if you explain how things apply to them in their world and bring it close to home to really make an effect. So helping people tell a story is something that I do.
I still remember in the PowerPoint presentation, you had some weird cheesy critter or figure that went through all of the my two takeaways was there was a weird critter that kept on showing back up, and then the no bullet points. The, the
Right. Yeah, that was Byron, my assistant.
yeah, was it the turtle?
It was a dragon.
Dragon, okay. Well, green. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah, I try to add a little interest, something to
yeah,
throw you
'cause-
off every once in a while, break it up.
yeah, it also helps, at least for me, it helps me remember when there's something different or something in contrast or something unique that I can connect the information to.
Right, and Byron he's often my assistant in a lot of my presentations. Whenever there's a point to be made, I pause and I let Byron come on stage and give you the message that you can tweet or write down, or hopefully store in that mind somewhere for retrieving later. So I'm glad you remember the weird critter.
Yeah, no, there's because with all the information that we see, and there's so much visual stimuli and so much information, that's often how I associate. Is I remember I put two things together, and then they're associated for me. And if I don't have something else to connect it to, it's out the window. Just because there's so much more coming in, and that's um,
And that's common for a lot of people, and that's exactly why I use Byron to add that association. It helps to create a container. If you are familiar with, well, if you have a kitchen, you are possibly familiar with how very cluttered your cupboards can get, and why Tupperware tries to come and sell you their cupboard organization services. They offer you all kinds of containers to put everything in, so that when you want to find something, it's easy to find. It's all neatly organized. If you give people containers, like a Byron character that says, here's something for you to remember, then that point gets stored into a container that says, oh, this is something I need to remember. And then when you go to retrieve that later, there it is in that container that you put it in.
I like mason jars myself. I mean, it's coffee.
Mason jars, very cool.
Yeah, yeah, mason jars. Mason jars are great. Mason
Yeah,
jars
and
are
mason
great.
jars, you can see what's inside, so that might be even better than Tupperware.
Yeah, it's I love my mason jars. Um, back to yeah. Well, I'll figure out how to link that in again at some point. What changes or suggestions do your clients normally embrace most easily? What are they most ready to do usually?
Oh boy, you know that's a difficult one, because usually usually they're ready to embrace their own ideas. So
No, don't say it. Don't say it. So.
that said, what I like to do is present my recommendations as their own ideas, which is, it can be challenging, and you don't want to be manipulative, right? But you do want to help. You're there to solve a problem, and you do that by asking a lot of questions and helping them to see the problem themselves and helping them to see the solution. And maybe you offer more than just your own solution. You offer other solutions as well, and then you offer the counter solution to those, because you know, here's a solution to something, and here's another way to do that, but the problem with doing it that way is this. And as you present that information, then the client starts to rationalize a solution that will actually work and that you can work with. And sometimes that conversation gets me to sort of change the way I would have done it without having that conversation with people. So I learn information by having those conversations, and together we work to come up with a solution that's going to solve the business problem and get people to learn the things that need to be learned, develop the story that's going to make sense to them. Yeah.
This just I don't want it to seem like I'm skipping over this, but the whole notion of story with instruction, that should be another interview, because that's, if story and learning, there's so much information about it, but as you indicated, many people, myself included, have difficulty telling stories or figuring out how. This is great. I know people learn by stories. There are no studies that show stories impede learning. All the evidence says stories enhance learning, but so many of us look at that and go, well, what does that mean? So
well, let me we can do that interview, but just to give you a quick example, let's say you're developing training around safety in the workplace, and you say, okay, here's your instructional design. People need to know X, Y, and Z. When you go from floor to floor, use the elevator and don't use the stairwell. And make sure you get out to your car before it gets dark, and if it gets dark, then take a security officer with you. This is a list. This is not a story, right? So instead, the story way of presenting that information is, imagine it's early in the morning, you got to work, and there's not very many people in the office, and you're going to go from the 5th floor down to the 3rd floor, and you decide you want to get your exercise, so you decide to take the stairwell. And as you're going down the stairwell, you get about halfway there, and there's another person in that stairwell, dressed not very businesslike, and you may or may not have forgotten your key card to get back to the floor that you need to. What are you going to do? Is that a safe situation to be in? All right, so in the first example I said, don't take the stairwell by yourself. In the second example, we put people in that situation and let them realize for themselves that, oh, hey, yeah, that could be a dangerous situation.
So it's taking more time to develop or offer an alternate context, or not just what the right choice is, but why to make a choice. Or
right, get people to experience what it is you're trying to get across to them. Because the thing about people, I mean, even young people, as in children, all the way up to adults, we have this foundation of information that already exists, and the more you can draw on that, the more you can tell them a story that's going to make them remember what you're trying to get across.
do you find corporate clients are easy to convince to use a story approach, or do you not tell them it's a story approach? Or, like, I mean, is it one of those things which is so embedded into the process, but you don't call it a story because you know somebody might reject it because it's called a story? Or do you come out and say, this is a story approach, it's a story method, and we have proven successes? I'm just curious how you present that to the client, or would you just do them and not let them know?
It's every situation is unique. Uh, if a client's going to let me go and do my thing, then I just bring it back as a story. They see that it's great. They're not sure why it's great, and sometimes they can tell that it was better than something that somebody else delivered, and they just don't know why. Other times, if they're just asking you to help them make something better that has already been created, I use my personal knowledge of stories to say, instead of saying it like this, what about doing it like this? And then suddenly they just instantly see that that's just a much better way to get the point across. I don't really come across too many people that that don't see the benefits of story, of using a story, because people learn through stories, and they don't always know why. They don't know the theory. They don't know all this stuff. They just know that that's what works. And so you start to give them suggestions around that, and they just see it for themselves. So
Cool.
sometimes there are some clients that really they really appreciate that theory and background, and if you can recognize that kind of client, then all the more to tell them why it should be told differently, and that story is the way to get your point across, and this is how you do it. Um, Especially in a sort of mentoring kind of position. I have a very good friend. She's very very bright, very just a all around good learner. She loves to ask questions, and she's a training manager. She actually manages people, and in the corporate world, I got out of the corporate world before I was ever in a position where I was officially managing people. I mean, I led teams all the time, but I never actually officially managed people. So that's what she's doing in the world. She was by trade a trainer, somebody who delivered the training as opposed to somebody that designed it. And now she's working with instructional designers, and she comes to me often asking for, um, you know, how can I do this and how can I make that better? And that's and just as a friend, it's not like a client relationship, but she loves those kind of things. She loves hearing how to turn something into a story, and why that works.
You hit on an important point that I think would also be useful to, if you could elaborate on it a little bit for some folks, the differences between the instructional designer and the trainer in the corporate world. Could you discuss those a little bit more, and perhaps where instructional design fits in and just some of the relationships between? Because for those of us who haven't been in part of that world, it's useful to have an idea and an improved understanding of how it works.
Yeah, when I first got into the field of instructional design and the training world in general, I thought it sort of a luxury that a corporation would have both an instructional designer that develops the content, and then a trainer who didn't really play any part in designing the instruction take that and go deliver it. Uh, but it really is the way the corporate world seems to work. And there's a different skill set involved. I typically develop the training that somebody else takes and goes to deliver to someone else. And sometimes I deliver it myself, but typically other people just have stronger skill sets, and where um, they would just do a better job with it. And if I can make all the materials come to life for them, they can take that and interpret it in a way that that clients or that the audience will react to better. For example, my friend who is a trainer by trade, she has a great way of acknowledging what people say, asking them questions. She has a very warm personality that really engages people and gets them excited about the content. And as much as I love to present things, I've presented at conferences, and I think I do an okay job. People tell me that I do okay anyway. I happen to know that in terms of the warmth and outreach, that that it was never one of my stronger points. It's something I have to really work hard at, and yet putting the content, arranging it in a story that people can relate to and learn from, is something I do incredibly well. I mean, not to talk myself up too much, but it's something that I enjoy quite a bit and get a lot of good feedback on.
So, when you did mention that you got your start in instructional design, how, as I recall, didn't you start out initially in tech writing or tech comm or something like that? Did you choose to go into instructional design, or was it something that just happened? Or could you tell us about that a little bit?
Sure. And this also is a segue to one of the questions that one of your students had that seemed to be, you said, could go off on a tangent. And that question had to do with what should we be telling our students to go into? And my answer to that, and I'll come back to your question because this plays a role in that. My answer to that question is tell your students to do what they're good at and what they love. It doesn't matter what fields are out there and what's going to be available for them. When I was younger, I enjoyed drawing. I enjoyed arts and things like that. And people always told me that's a hobby. That's not practical. You're not going to earn any money at that unless you're really good, right? You have to be. There's only like, 1 in a million that becomes the Picasso that makes lots of money off of his art. Okay, well, today I have seen lots and lots and lots of professions that involve art. You've got your games, your game developers, you've got Kleenex boxes. Somebody has to design those things on the Kleenex boxes. The fabrics that you get at the store, somebody has to design the patterns for that. Somebody has to weave that stuff together. And the things like microphones, somebody has to design that and make it not only functional but beautiful. So don't worry about what's going to be available. Just do what you're good at and what you love to do, because eventually you will be good at it and you will find a place where you can make a living doing exactly that. Now, that comes up because you asked me how I got into the field where I'm at today. I was going to college trying to be an electrical engineer. I just absolutely loved the sciences and the maths. I got all the way up to math classes that were beyond calculus. I got into differential equations and even started in applied math. The problem that I had was that I was not very good at getting the right answer. And you had to get the right answer to get the good grades that would get you into the very competitive engineering field. On the other hand, I was incredibly good at writing. And any kind of writing assignment that I had in any class, I could do that at last minute, and I always got a good grade. And not only a good grade, but I often had a teacher saying, this is exactly what I wanted students to do, and people have such a hard time trying to figure that out. I said, well, yeah, I read the requirements and I did what you were asking for, and it actually it puzzled me that people had such a hard time trying to get a good grade in this, because this was something I could do in my sleep. So I got into technical communication, which was a place where I could hold on to that love of technical stuff without having to get the right answer. And I could write about it and explain it to people that didn't have a love of technology, and make it exciting for them. And so I went to where I was pulled into what I was good at, uh, technical writing. I did very well. I got my degree in technical communication. Started an internship and was hired within, I guess, about 6 months or 8 months into the job. And I was hired under an instructional designer. This was somebody who had a master's in instructional design. And one of the things that she would have me do is review the instructional manuals that she was developing. And I saw the difference between technical writing and instructional design, and a lot of times people will conflate the two. They're very different, and in that instructional design has to be, well, there's a lot of things that go into that, like, for example, designing it into a very narrow goal, like the business goal, for example. You have to think about the goal. You have to think about how people learn, and bring that into how you're going to present the materials. And technical writing is just making sure that all the information that people need is presented in a clear and, well, not very interesting way. It's technical writing.
Hey, hey. Don't.
If you're really good, you can add a little bit of spice.
It's the people that are really good that can make the boring stuff interesting.
Well, at least definitely easy to understand, right? Less painful to read. Seriously, I actually know some technical writers that, they write their stuff very succinctly and well, but it's still very hard to read. It's not personable, and there are a lot of things you can do to a technical topic to make it more interesting and digestible, is a word I like to use.
So you began with a internship and then moved from.
Right. I had the very fortunate benefit of getting hired under someone who became a mentor to me. She saw that I was interested in the work that she was doing, and I asked if there was anything that I could do to help her to that end. She says, well, and this was very important. She first asked me, do you really want to do this? Because a lot of people will just try to do whatever, pays the bills, right? And they'll do something because there's a vacuum, and they see an opportunity to get that work done and be noticed for it. And I think she was aware of that, and she wanted to make sure that it was something that I was actually interested in and would commit to. And she pulled some strings to send me off to some instructional design courses, and we had the employees where I worked got an education budget. She pulled some strings to get the extra budget to fly me to where these classes were that I wanted to take, and I've been doing that ever since. But I also do a lot of technical writing still, because people remember me for that as well. And hey, if it's gonna pay the bills, then I'm happy to do either, because I'm good at both, and I like doing both.
So that kind of segues into some of the benefits of being a consultant. What are some additional benefits as well as challenges of doing consulting work? I mean, it's easy to have a glamorous thing of you're your own boss, but at the same time, you are your own boss. And what are some of the challenges or difficult things that it's very few people can actually prepare you for, but it's good to be aware of.
Yes, being a consultant takes a diverse set of skills. Um, yeah, you get to be your own boss, you set your own hours, but at the same time, you are working for a client and you are making promises to produce something for them in a given amount of time. And you have to be a lot more careful with your time because they're paying for your time. And that can be a very difficult thing. It's one thing to work for a company under a salary where you're working against deadlines, um, and you need to get up and take a break and walk around the block. That time is not really counted against you, but as a consultant, you're running the clock when you're working. I mean, you can still run the clock while you get up to go get a snack or use a restroom, but when you get into those really stuck moments, and this happens in any kind of work, but this is sometimes creative work, and you get that blank slate, and sometimes you have to turn off the clock and go do something else. What I have found helps me is to have a lot of different projects going on at the same time, because when I get stuck on one project, I can go to another project and work on that for a while and move around a little bit. But it's sometimes hard to maintain that focus. The other things that a lot of people might not think about are all the um, business qualities you need to have, the business savvy. You need to be able to negotiate your price. You need to create a statement of work. You need to keep the cash flow flowing. So you have to be responsible with your finances, because sometimes while you're as a consultant, you name your terms. Part of the negotiation might be how you get paid, and if you want to get paid a little bit more money, you might have to wait longer to get that money. So you submit a bill at the end of the month. It might take you a month to get paid or longer. I once had a month-long contract. We agreed to a set number of hours and a price per hour, and then at the end of the month, I submitted my bill. So I worked that whole month without getting any money, and then I submitted my bill. And the payment terms were 60 days after invoice. So I didn't get paid until 3 months after starting that work. So you have to think about that flow of money, and I had some money in savings that and do that get me through those delays. So there's that. There's selling yourself. I mentioned that most of my work has come to me. In fact, all of it has. But even though, you still have to sell yourself when somebody's asking for your help. You can't just do it as a favor. You have to get paid for it, and you have to tell them why they should pay as much as you're asking for it. So classes in negotiation. I actually took a class in negotiation in college, and that has been a real help to me. Let's see what
That's
else.
I'm
Yeah,
just thinking the how setting the setting the price or the negotiation on price just seems like that would be the most difficult or most challenging part, more challenging than I think the work would be.
It most definitely is a very challenging part of the work. There's, I mean, you have to know what your worth is, and in what I do, the scale is anywhere from $40 an hour up to 120 to like a full consultancy where more than one person is working on it. Might charge as much as 200 an hour, but you know, in that case, you've got maybe two or three people working on something. And where do you fit in that? And if you're going to charge $100 an hour, why should somebody pay that? And if you really need the work, how can you say, "Hey, I charge $100 an hour, but I really want this work, so for you, I'll give you 50." Well, now you just cut down your value, and you can't necessarily do that either. So it's a definite dance that you have to learn.
Do they have classes in that? Yeah, that's
They actually have consultants for consultants out there. There's blogs you can read. There's yeah, no, it's been a learn as I go kind of thing.
what is the best part of doing the work that you do in this field?
The best part is making a difference. I mean, I'm not changing the world by helping people know what they need to know to deliver an ad or how to facilitate a meeting better. But in a very small way, it kind of is. It's making a difference in the lives of those people who have participated. It's making a difference for my client who has a better product than they might have otherwise. It's just that satisfaction. The best part of what I do is when I see that light go on for someone, when they get something that they just didn't get before. It's such a convoluted technical topic, and they just don't really care, and yet I can present it in such a way that not only do they get it, but they understand why they need to care about it. And that's just that's the best part of it. I really enjoy those moments.
Yeah, when you see the lights go on,
Yeah.
yeah, that's that's the best part of education. That's the best part of the education.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. Do, do, do. Given this is another of the scripted questions, I think it's easier to read here. Given your time and experience in the fields of e-learning and consulting, what skills have helped you out the most in your work? And what skills did you not have that you needed to develop most rapidly to do your work?
One of the most interesting skills that I found that I wasn't very good at is the ability to ask good questions. Um, I've always been someone that has observed things, and for the most part, I think I get it, right? And I don't think of any questions to ask because I understand what somebody's telling me. And yet, sometimes as I get into the work and really get involved, all the questions start to surface, all the things I needed to know. And then being in a situation where I'm working with somebody who is good at asking good questions, I just, I just, I'm in awe. It's like, how did you know to ask that question? That's really important. I mean, and they don't seem like very big questions, but they reveal so much. I mean, the way you ask a question as opposed to what questions you ask. Uh, that's something I'm working on every day.
And what skill, aside from the negotiation class that you took, which proved very useful, what skills did you already have when you came into the field that perhaps benefited you unexpectedly or more so than you would have thought? Like, oh, I'm glad I knew that. I had no idea it would be so useful. Kind of.
Things that I have actually found useful, the most useful in what I do, are things that I learned in classes not necessarily related to my degree. uh, I took a design class at the community college before I went on to the university, and this guy was really good. He was One of our assignments was to take a whole deck of 3x5 cards, and we had to start painting the first one white, and then the next one was you added just a dab of black, and so it was a slightly more grayish white, and you added just little bits of black all the way. I had my apartment full of all these cards that gradually went from white all the way to the last card, which was black. And it sounds like a ridiculous assignment, but that whole class taught me about design more than just design of colors and shapes. I learned the importance of design in itself. I mean, this field is called instructional design, and why you would line up this line here instead of here, why this goes there instead of there, are really important considerations as you're putting together a story to tell your client. And it seems like a very unrelated thing, and it kind of is, but design is design, and the concepts have applied for me all across the board in what I do. So that was a very surprising skill to have learned, and I was really happy to have taken that class. And then one of the classes that was actually related to my field was a class where, and it was actually a specific exercise in a writing class where we had to cut the deadwood. We were given a whole bunch of sentences, and we had to cut out all the necessary words. In some cases, in very rare cases, it actually meant making a sentence a little bit longer to make it more clear. But I find myself doing that, going back. It's a lot easier to write a lot of stuff. It's easier to write a longer letter than it is to write a short letter, right? I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. And cutting the deadwood in your material is a huge benefit. I mean, you really need to laser focus your content to make a point and to make an impact.
Cool. As someone with a background in composition and tech, I mean, I taught composition, but also in technical writing. Yes, that's why short writing is so. People think it's easy, but the most brilliant thing you can find is a short, concise message that actually achieves all of the goals, and there's nothing extra. I love seeing that. It's it's.
You know,
It's
I read an article at some point. I'll have to see if I can find it and send it to you. But there was a school, I believe in the DC area, that was getting ready to be shut down because all of the students were failing and dropping out and not graduating. And for whatever reason, the principal decided to focus only on writing skills, to really put a lot of emphasis on teaching students how to write. He noticed that his students had a difficult time trying to explain anything and how to just communicate in general. And so everybody had to do these writing exercises, and as they improved in writing, they not only improved in writing, they improved in their math classes, in their history classes, all across the board. The graduation rates just skyrocketed. They went from, like, I don't know the numbers exactly, but it was something like from 30% to 70% of students that were now graduating after implementing this focus on the ability to write. It's really an important skill no matter what you do.
No, no, you're preaching to the choir. There's no, no arguments from me. We're just about at 7 o'clock. We're just about at an hour. And before I ask you the final question, I wanted to thank you for your time, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do the interview. There's a lot of knowledge like yours which is out there, and what I hope is that interviews like this and that other people are as generous, other professionals are as generous as you are, because if we can start connecting, studying classes and academic work with practitioners, then I think everybody can gain. And also, I see it as part of the networking too. If they can see what kind of work y'all are doing in corporate training and consulting, they'll have a better shot. And it'll also make them more effective at what they do. And hopefully they will all exceed everything they've learned in my class or my classes. That's the thing that I think you always want to see, is you want to see people do better than you, because then that helps show how, anyway, I'm babbling. But so my question to you is, if you had one or two pieces of advice, pretend you're in the position of your mentor, as you were when you first started in the field, and you meet somebody and they come into your workplace, they're hired as a temp, and they are interested in instructional design, but you don't have the time to mentor them because you know they're going to be gone in 2 days or a week, but you really want to encourage them. You want to foster that talent. You want to foster that interest. What one or two suggestions would you give to them to not just have a quick flash in the pan kind of engagement with e-learning or instructional design, but to really feed that talent, to feed that interest and passion?
Okay, well, first of all, it's been an honor. I'm so glad you asked me to do this. This has been fun. And what I would tell people is rub elbows with the greats, make friends, network. In instructional design, focus on learning how to tell a good story, and don't be afraid to break the rules. There's a lot of dogma out there in instructional design. Just that if you break the rules, be able to tell that story about why it's okay to do it this way instead of that way, because you'll face a lot of resistance if you just go out there and break the rules willy-willy. There's a lot of people that are just kind of stuck on their ways, and the final thing is remember to look at the business goal. And even if you're not in the corporate world, if you're in the academic world, there's still a business goal there. There's your clients are the students. They're paying money, even if it's not their own money. There's tax money involved to come there and learn something, and you want to make a difference in that. You want your instruction to be worth it. And back to being careful with dogma. If you're too concerned on how things are supposed to be done, it's a lot harder for you to see that business goal that you need to work toward.
Great. All right. Well, again, this has been an interview with Katie Stroud, who is kindly and generously giving us an hour of her time. Maybe possibly in the future we can talk about, I'm really curious about the story development and learning. Lots of people talk about it, but it's, where do you start? And maybe another point in time. Either way, thank you so much for your time, and I will have this recorded. So it's automatically been recorded, so it'll be available on YouTube, and then you and I can communicate and figure out what an optimal editing / presentation is for this, for both your purposes professionally as well as the educational goals, and hopefully other people will learn from this as well. So, does it sound good?
Fantastic. I hope somebody learned something from this out there. And
I already have. I've learned multiple things, so that's the selfish reason for why I'm doing this. You go to the experts, learn what they learn. It's
right. There's one more thing I wanted to close with. Something that somebody told me in a career development class was, "You know things." And she proceeded by asking us questions like, "What's the major export of Colombia?" It sounds like kind of a complicated question, but I bet you know the answer to that.
You're asking me. I'm guessing coffee or cocaine.
Coffee. Well,
All
there's
right.
that too. Right, but remember that you know things and build off of that. Don't go out there thinking that you're just a greenie needing some help.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Gregory.
All right. You have a good night.
You too. Bye bye.
And ciao.